Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we're joined by a very special guest. He is a martial arts master instructor, keynote speaker, and coach, Mr. Chris Natzke. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
Man, I'm kind of interested in how you got started in martial arts here, so I think it's going to be a great episode to kind of dive into that.
Okay, excellent. Well, would you like me to tell a little story?
Yeah,
All
start off
right.
by telling us who Chris Natzke is.
Yeah. So, as you said in the intro, I'm an 8th degree black belt, former national taekwondo champion. I've been doing martial arts since I was a young lad of 10 years old, and started back in 1973. Back in the day, there was a TV show called Kung Fu that was on ABC. And the thing about martial arts back in the old dark ages, like when I started, is there wasn't a martial arts school on every corner like there is today in many major cities. And so it was very uncommon at that time. And in fact, there were very few children that were training at that time. That basically came in after 1980 when the Karate Kid movie came out. So I was there training with a bunch of adults. And I remember my first class like it was yesterday, seeing these guys with these amazingly powerful movements and kicking and punching and blocking. And I literally fell in love on the spot and felt like I came home. And so it started a journey that's continued to this day. And now this is my 53rd year of training in martial arts.
Nice. What age were you then when you started?
Well, say again?
What age were you when you started?
I was 10 years old. Yep.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any moments that you wanted to quit because it got hard, but you decided to stick it out?
You know, it's really interesting because that's a great question, because in teaching martial arts, particularly youth for the last 5 decades, I've definitely seen that there are a lot of moments in kids' lives where they don't want to train. I think in today's day and age, there's a lot of distractions, a lot of other things they can be doing. But I really didn't have that. I one time quit for about 2 weeks. When I moved from Southern California to Cincinnati, I thought, I think I'm going to try some different things. And that lasted 2 weeks and I got the itch and I started training again, and I haven't stopped. So I really didn't have a moment where I wanted to quit. It was always something I wanted to do, something I thought about all the time. And it was a great form of self-expression, but also a way of building, who I've become as a human being.
Yeah. How has it helped you with your mindset?
Oh my gosh, it's probably one of the most important aspects of my mindset. I mean, in martial arts, Taekwondo in particular, which is my main discipline, we have what are called the Taekwondo tenets, which are courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. And they basically act as the foundation of all of our behaviors, of our mindset, of the way that we view the world. And so at this point in my life, it's hard for me to separate those from who I am just as a person, because that's something that I've grown up with.
Yeah. I mean, I used to wrestle and I coached wrestling for a long time. So I understand how that stuff helps you with your mindset and self-discipline.
Sure. Well, and the thing of it is, and wrestling is very much the same way, I would imagine, is that you're challenged, right? You're challenged in practice. You're challenged in meets. In my case, you're challenged in martial art classes, at testings, when you're going for new belt levels, when you're in tournaments and competing. And you learn how to deal with that pressure, which I think is an amazing attribute to have, particularly as a young person, where you realize that there's going to be difficulties, there's going to be obstacles, and how you continue to move through those. It just becomes part of your DNA, I think, after a while, because you've learned that if you stick to something and you continue to move forward, there's some great reward on the other side, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I've always felt this way, and in fact, continue to, that martial arts for me, and hopefully in the students that I taught, throughout the decades, it's a metaphor for life. It's not just an activity that you do. It acts as a metaphor that you can apply to all aspects of your life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. What has that journey because I'm sure it wasn't an easy journey to get to become an 8th degree black belt.
Yeah.
What did that journey teach you most about yourself?
Well, there are many things, obviously. I think that the one key is how, when we can set a tangible goal for ourselves and break it down into small digestible chunks, that almost anything is possible. Strong, powerful, consistent action done over time can lead to massive results. And I think that many times we live in a society of, we want quick results, quick fixes to things. And I think in martial arts, you learn that lesson. You learn the value of patience. You learn the value of taking one step at a time and seeing how those habits and those practices can really just blossom over time. And as I said before, and then how do you, the important part is not how you just do it in the dojo or the dojang in Korean, but how do you take those lessons and apply them to real life, into your work, into sports, into your relationships? How does that work? Because when you do, now you basically have an inborn formula for success that you can apply that template to almost anything.
Yeah. What has martial arts taught you about success that most people never learn?
Part I've already mentioned, which is in terms of how you take one step at a time and things are not going to happen instantaneously. I think it taught me about defeat and how to deal with that gracefully, right? You probably had the same, same experience in wrestling, right? I remember seeing a movie a while ago where a kid was wrestling and he was on his back and there was a sign on the wall that said, "If you can see this, you're losing," right? Because he was about to get pinned. But the other thing is that it also teaches that that we have a greater power in ourselves than I think we can ever really imagine, right? I mean, for me and the multitudes of students that I've taught, some of my best students were the ones that weren't the most technically proficient. They weren't the strongest physically or mentally at the beginning, but they just kept showing up. And pretty soon they started finding that part of themselves that they could really go, wow, I've never discovered this about myself before. I can do this. I can achieve this. I can put when I put this effort in, I can achieve great things. And so I think that's probably one of the greatest things. And along with that confidence, then comes humility, right? Because that confidence in yourself doesn't come from a place of arrogance. It comes from a place of humility because you've had some bumps and bruises along the way. But you realize that, for me, some of the greatest martial artists, and I've met many, many, many throughout my career, were some of the most humble people I've ever had encountered, Yeah. So that's what makes it so beautiful, is to know that you have that balance of being able to be very strong and very, very confident, but at the same time, live a life as a humble person and strong person.
Yeah. Most of the time, those defeats can really humble you. So, like on that way back up, hey, I can go back down again. So
that's right. But, I think that's a valuable life lesson in anything, because very rarely do we ever go from point A to point B on our quest for a goal or something that we're trying to achieve. There's always going to be setbacks along the way. In fact, I would argue that the larger the breakthrough is that we want to have in our lives, the larger the goal, generally the larger the obstacles are as well. And so, we can all think about people in our lives. In fact, we've had the same experience ourselves. Is it wasn't the most talented person that ending up on top. It was the person that just kept showing up.
Yeah. I like how you talk about chunking things down in pursuit of a goal. Why do you think so many people get that wrong and try to just jump from point A to point B?
Yeah. No, I think we have developed in a culture, and there's wonderful things in our culture, but we have developed one aspect where it's instant gratification. If I want this, I press a button, I go to Amazon and I get it, right? And so there's wonderful character that develops through that stage. And I think that martial arts serves as a template for that, because, you don't come on into the dojo and go, wow, this is really cool. Next week, I'll be a black belt. You have to continue to train. And then along that path, you have several belts that you have to achieve. And each one of those belts is broken down into small chunks of curriculum that you need to be able to demonstrate. And so what it does is it kind of teaches that as almost a life habit, right? And, one of the principles I teach in my coaching is begin with the end in mind and then break it down, right? Begin with the end of mind and then break it down, and then go to the next right move, and then the next right move after that. And pretty soon you start building momentum. and now you're on a path, and then it's not only momentum, it becomes a very familiar and comfortable way of living. That's just how you tend to exist. And when you again apply that to almost anything in your life, you can have a degree of success.
Yeah. You talk about a champion's mindset. What
Yeah.
does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I have three, sometimes four aspects when I do my keynote speaking, and I speak about, the mind of a champion, and I'll share three with you. Well, actually, I'm going to share four with you right now. Number one is what I call having a purposeful vision, right? Is, many of us, we're going through life and we know where we kind of want to be, but it's just, maybe it's just about being comfortable each day. But when you have a purposeful vision, something that's driving you ahead, something that you can see, you can feel, you can taste, it's something that it excites you. And I believe all of us have an aspect of that inside ourselves when we want to, share our gifts in a certain way. So we have a vision, number one. And that is the one thing in terms of all the martial art training and all the, the tournaments and things I did. It was highly steeped in having that purposeful vision of what I wanted to achieve. The second element is something I call conscious persistence. And I purposely put the word conscious in front of that because many of us are persistent about a lot of things in our lives, right? We have habits that we do. We persistently act in certain ways, but many times we're not conscious about those things. And we keep doing the same thing we've always done, and we expect a different result, and it just doesn't happen. Right. And I always joke, I'll oftentimes say this to my coaching clients is, have you ever had an experience where, say, you left work, you left the office, you left wherever you're employed, and you drove those 30 minutes home, and all of a sudden you realized you were driving up the driveway and you had no idea how you got from work to your house because you were so preoccupied in your mind about other things. You weren't present. You weren't conscious about what was going on. So what I always tell my clients is to slow things down. Look at what's really happening and then plan your course from there. And then the next two I kind of combine, and it is about taking inspired action, right? And just as I noted before, is God meets us at the point of action, right? You can dream all you want, but you got to take the action. But I put the caveat in there as well as when we're taking action, I think where we're most effective is when we're doing it from a place of service. How we can take the gifts that we have and make a positive impact in the world in whatever way that is. Everyone has different ways of expressing that. But when you combine those two, taking action, but you also have a high degree of service and wanting to make a positive impact, now I think you're really, really on a great course.
Yeah, I love that because the one thing I learned when I was going through my own little process of things was God's going to give you things, but if you give it back to everybody else, everything he's given you, more is going to be given back.
It's never failed me. And, I just recently celebrated 30 years of teaching martial arts here in Denver. And we had a celebration a couple of weeks ago to commemorate that. And I got to see students who some I hadn't seen in decades, right? And to hear their stories about how their time with us positively impacted them and then impacted their work and impacted their families and their kids and things like that. It was the best. It was absolutely the best. And, that's the thing too, is we don't realize as human beings sometimes and how even the smallest action we take of service can really positively impact someone. We don't know what the kind thing that we say or the kind act that we share can put someone on a totally different trajectory for that day. And, I don't think it's an exaggeration sometimes in their life, just because one person decided to show up and act kindly. And I think that we as martial artists, and it's one thing that our organization makes it part of black belt training in the 4 months prior to them testing for their black belt, that they have to generate 400 random acts of kindness. In addition to all the kicking and the punching and the sparring and the board breaking and everything else, they have to generate 400 random acts of kindness. And we have over 250,000 that we've logged in the last 10, 12 years. Well, I know that those actions make a difference, not only in our community, but also in the lives of those that share those.
I like that. So, what would they have to do to
Yeah.
have it constitute as a random act of
Yeah,
kindness?
so we literally have an online app that they log them. And it could be as simple as opening up a door. We have some kids that get multiple credits by going and working in a soup kitchen for a day. They may be helping in class. They may be helping a sibling with their homework. We'll go and do kickathons for Children's Hospital and raise money for that. I mean, we're very community oriented within our organization here in the Denver area. And the reason that I do that is because when they're given this assignment, it can seem like a lot, right? 400 random acts of kindness. Now the kids, 100 of those have to be home chores. So parents love me, right?
Yeah.
But the idea here is that that's a lot. That's like 3 a day, right? When you break it down, it's not big. But when a child or even an adult goes, oh, 400, that's a lot. But what you have to do is now you have to start looking for those. And when you start looking for them, when you start looking for things, you'll start seeing them. Whatever you're looking for, you'll probably see. And so now what happens, that becomes a habit. And you start seeing opportunities wherever, that you may not have ever seen before. And now it just becomes part of who you are as a human being.
Yeah. Like I like that because it's like you said, it becomes like your standard. Hey,
Yeah,
I'm going to hold this door open, or I'm going to take this shopping cart all the way and make sure I put it away. Little things like that become who you are as a person.
Just think, Ryan, if everyone, not even everyone, let's say 10% of the people on the planet were doing that. Can you imagine the change that we would have in our world?
Yeah. Because you kind of see it now. It's starting to go downhill a little bit with everybody being kind of, not trying to be mean or anything, but the entitlement.
Well, so that's one of the reasons that I feel my work, that's what drives me, right? Is having that impact. I think that each and every one of us, as I said before, have gifts to share. And if there are any ways that we can impact, it's like think globally, but act locally, right?
Yeah.
Where can we make an impact? And not only in our own personal lives, but if we are in leadership roles, how we can do that by extension, right? And so I know that if I've got, I've had now 2,000 students get their black belt with me. And now if every one of those people did 400 random acts of kindness, do the math, right? So it's just my way of saying, wow, if I have a legacy, I want it to be that. Hey, it's great to be able to teach someone to do a great side kick, right? Or someone who can, kick someone in the head and look really good doing it. That's all cool, right? But that's not what's going to make a difference of them as a human being, right? And many people will train in martial arts for a while and then they won't continue it for the rest of their life. And I get that. But if they take the lessons that they glean from that experience and continue to apply it in their life, then I did my job.
Yeah. What are the daily habits that actually create a champion's mindset?
Well, it's a great question. And one of the things that I love talking about is I have, I'm going to distill it down with this. I think that the people that I've observed, and I've done a lot of research on this, both, watching videos, reading books, seeing people in leadership roles, and those that have the greatest degree of happiness and success in all aspects of their lives. I'm not just talking out in the business world. I'm also talking about their relationships and their health and wellness and their spiritual development. They have a tendency to start off their days with a very specific regimen of activities. They start out their days in a solid way. It's not like they're responding or reacting to the day. The first thing they're doing positive activities. And I have distilled those down to what I call the 6 M's of morning mastery. So the 6 M's for me that I've been practicing now as I've developed these for probably over 15 years now, each and every day, are these 6 M's are meditation or mindfulness, getting quiet at the beginning of the day. It's easy for us to pick these guys up the first thing we wake up, right? And pretty soon we're locked in. So taking some time to get quiet. And meditation doesn't mean sitting on a pillow chanting Om. That's not what it means, although it could be. But it means about getting quiet, about just listening, right? And connecting with something bigger than ourselves. And then the next would be mental imaging. So seeing yourself in positive ways. I once had a coach tell me, Chris, if you're going to fantasize, you might as well win, right?
Yeah.
So, and I do that each and every day. Like this morning when I was going through my process, I was already rehearsing this this conversation, right? So that I was setting myself up for success. So I've got mindfulness or meditation. Um, I've got my mental imaging. Then I've got what I call mind treatment. And mind treatment is saying affirmative phrases, repeating affirmative statements in your mind, right? And some may do that just through straight affirmations. Some may do it in affirmative prayer, whatever works for them. But again, it's bringing together this whole aspect of I can set the tone for myself. I may not be able to change every aspect of what's happening in my life, but I can always have control of how I respond to it and how I set myself up to deal with it. So you've got mindfulness, you've got mental imaging, you've got mind treatment, and then the fourth is movement. Now, note I didn't say exercise, although I exercise all the time, but movement is some sort of movement that we can do with our bodies. Because, one of the things that we have in our society in the United States is we tend to get pretty sedentary. We sit behind a computer, right, all day. We get up, we go downstairs, we drink our coffee, eat our breakfast, we walk into the garage, we get into our car, we drive to our office, we take the elevator up and we sit at a desk for 8 hours, and then we come home and then we sit in our recliner, right? And we're not moving. And it's been proven in areas called the blue zones, which are areas in the world where people live routinely into their 90s and their 100s, that one of the common things that everyone does, even at advanced ages, is they move their bodies. And then the next one after that is what I would call motivation. And we have at our disposal the greatest library of all time. And it's right here, right? We can look at videos, we can read books, we can listen. I mean, there are so many things we can do. If you want to find someone that can teach you, right, or be a mentor to you in terms of high class motivation for your life, it's so easy to find. And then the final aspect of the 6 M's is memoir, taking some time to journal each and every day. Get your thoughts out. If you've got distress in your mind, get it down on paper so you move it out. Sometimes some of your best ideas may come through there. So really what you're doing in those 6 M's is you're setting yourself up for success throughout the entire day and beyond. And when you're looking at things that way, once again, you're the one that's setting the tone for your day. You're the one that is setting yourself up for success. And then it's about being aware of what are the things you can do to continue to move that as your opportunities come before you in your life.
Yeah, I like that. You got like just a routine to keep you going.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I would say to people that are listening to this, Ryan, I just named 6, and those are the 6 M's that I do. If you don't have a morning routine, choose one. And it doesn't even have to be one of those that I named. Just choose one and start, getting consistent with it. And then maybe add another. I can do mine in about the first hour of the day, and so that sets me up for success. And, some people might say, oh, I don't have time in the morning. I'd say, well, why don't you get up a little earlier, right? Or go to bed a little earlier, right? Get off of the television, get off of your computer or your phone and get that good rest, and then get up a little earlier. And for me, the morning is like my favorite time. Quiet. I can really, some of my most creative ideas in terms of my speaking and my coaching and the content that I develop for social media, in terms of my inspirational stuff that I put out, I get those ideas early in the morning. So,
yeah, I think a lot of people are missing out on that because like you said, most of your ideas probably will come in the morning if you just take that time to quiet yourself and quiet everything around you.
100%. It's actually been scientifically proven that some of the best ideas that will come to us is when you are almost coming out of sleep. You're kind of that half wakefulness, and that's where your subconscious mind is allowed to just be open and free. And sometimes some of the best ideas are downloaded. That's why we get some great ideas in the shower, right? Because we're not trying. It's just like we're open to it, and all of a sudden it comes through.
Yeah. What's the biggest lie high achievers believe that actually keep them stuck?
That working harder or working more is better. So I'll give you a little, and I'm not putting the poo-poo on dedication and work, but when there's a difference between, I think, enjoying and being passionate about what you're doing and leaning into it and acting from that place and feeling like you just got to grind. You got to grind. And I'm speaking to you as someone that used to have that way of looking at life. And I'll give you an example. Back in 2000, yes, 2000, I was getting ready to test for my 6th degree black belt at that time. And I was working it hard, man. And as a former athlete, or I'm assuming you're probably still athletic, right? But as a former wrestler, you know what it's like to grind, man. You're getting ready
Yeah.
for the meet, right? And so I had my master instructors coming in town, and I'm training. I'm doing every work. I was training 6 days a week, probably throwing between 1,000 and 1,200 kicks per training session. And I started to really feel worn down. And I went to my homeopathic doctor at the time, who was a former Mr. Colorado bodybuilder. So he and I always had this great relationship. We could understand each other as athletes. And he runs all the tests on me, and he says, Chris, man, I got to tell you something. You are way overtraining. In fact, your body's beginning to break down. You're getting ready to have a major injury. He goes, I'm not talking about pulling a hamstring. I mean, you're going to tear one. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I start to put him off, like, oh, I got to work hard for this testing. It's so important. My instructors are coming in. And I was really pushing back on him. And he said to me, how many kicks could you hold it to per week to be ready for this? He goes, I'm getting 100. And I said, well, I guess I could take it down to 100 a day. He goes, no, a week. Again, I was doing 1,000 to 1,200 a day. And finally, he got through to me. And he said, Chris, you need to understand something. Rest is part of your training. Rest is part of your training. And he was coming at from the world of bodybuilding, right? So if you do the bench press and you do your lats and your biceps on one day, you don't do them the next day. Your growth comes from the rest when it repairs. And I had never had that concept before, because I always felt if I wasn't training, I was falling behind. And when I was competing, I had the same thing, man. If I'm not training today, my opponent is training today. Now, it doesn't mean that you lax off. That's not what I'm saying. It just means that you have to listen to your body. And I think it's not just your body, but it's all parts of life. If it's in your business, if it's in, your work, if it's in your relationships, whatever, you need to have that balance, because if you're running on empty, pretty soon what happens is you have nothing left to give. And now you're becoming resentful, or your body's breaking down. The best way for you to be fully there for the people that you want to serve is to make sure you take care of yourself. In fact, one of my coaches told me one time is you need to take care of yourself so you can help take care of others. So you take care of yourself first so you can help take care of others. So I think, going back to your question, I know that might have been a long answer, but the high achievers feel that they have to grind all the time. And it's
I've
not
been there before too, so that's very understandable.
Yeah, and I get it. I've been there, and I still have challenge with that. I still have to go, okay, I got to slow this thing down a little bit, or I need to be a little more mindful. And when I do that, I find that then things start to come toward me rather than me always chasing, right?
Yeah. That's one thing, like you said right there, is I realized, hey, I can't fill up anybody else's cup when I'm completely empty.
100%.
So I need that time to recharge.
It's so important. And I think particularly people who are in leadership roles, and that leadership role could be in business, could be in organizations, could be in your family. If you are giving so much and you're not taking the time to refill your cup, I've never seen it work out well.
Yeah. Why do so many driven people hit that ceiling then?
I think that might be the key piece right there. You see, what ends up happening is that feeling like you always have to drive and you always have to grind and push it. I believe at its very root comes from fear. Fear of not being good enough, fear of not getting enough, fear of looking bad, fear of failure, sometimes even fear of success, right? And so they hit that ceiling because the strategies that they've used in the past that got them where they were is not going to take them where they need to go. There has to be some sort of, just like the way that we used to look at the world when we were 6, 7, 8 years old is not the same way we look at the world as adults, right? But some of us are still using those same strategies that we learned as children. And a lot of those were based off of, things that we didn't really maybe have inside of ourselves, but they're things that were put upon us Maybe we learn them from our parents, we learn them from our coaches or teachers, etc. And so I think that it's part of the human evolution, if you will, that at some point in time you have to look at yourself objectively and say, is this working for me? And is there a way for me to change so I can take myself to my next level of growth?
Well, how do they end up get to that breakthrough moment then?
Well, most of the time they hit the ceiling, and it's out of pure exhaustion and frustration that they realize it's not working anymore.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been there myself.
I've been there
right?
too. And then it's like,
myself,
oh,
right?
I mean, need like a month or so off because my body and my mind is just completely drained.
So here, I have 5 questions that I encourage my clients to ask themselves. I'm not saying they're the perfect questions, but at least it gets you to be mindful when you're up against it, right? You got the challenge, you're up, you can't go beyond the ceiling. And the first thing is, and then let me preface it by this, is it's been said that the quality of our life is in direct proportion to the quality of questions we ask ourselves. So if we ask ourselves bad questions like, why does this always happen to me? Why does he always do that to me? Why is she always yelling at me, right? You're probably not going to get really good answers. But if you say, what am I supposed to learn from this situation? Why, how can I use this situation for my growth, upliftment and learning? Now you're going to get different answers. So these 5 questions I think are powerful. The first question is, what's really happening here? What's really happening here? And so what I mean by that is, when things come into our lives that challenge us, it's easy for us to put a story around them. He said this bad thing happened, etc. And I'm not saying that when challenge occurs that we don't have a time where we vent, that we go, oh my God, this is really tough. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying go through that process, but then go, what's really happening here? Oh, my boss told me to do this. Now I have to work this week and I'm not happy about it. Okay, that is what happened. Now what am I going to do? What's my learning from that? What am I going to do to transcend that? The second question is, what wants to happen here? Now, what I mean by that is when we go from point A to point B, I mentioned before that we'll oftentimes have distractions, we'll have obstacles, etc. And sometimes when we hit those obstacles, people say, well, it's just not meant to be. But maybe we're being encouraged to look at it differently and maybe take a different path that's going to really expand our learning and our growth. So what wants to happen here? Is there a different way that we're being maybe led to go versus our traditional way of doing it? And then these 3 questions kind of work in concert. What do I need to keep doing? What are the habits and strategies and activities that I've been doing up until now that have really have served me up until now and are continuing to serve me that can help me through this difficult time? What do I need to keep doing? Do I need to keep meditating? Do I need to keep exercising? Do I need to keep, having my mind filled, with positive affirmative thought, whatever that is? What do I need to keep doing? Number 4 is, what do I need to stop doing? What are the activities and strategies and behaviors and mindset that are not serving me anymore? Right? I keep hitting this wall and I keep trying to do this, but maybe I need to stop doing it this way. And then finally, number 5 is, what do I need to start doing? What's a different way for me to look at this? And what's a different activity, a different mindset, a different strategy that I can move into this situation with? And what happens then is when you just step back for a little bit and slow it down, rather than react to those situations and react to hitting that ceiling, now we can mindfully respond to it, right? And now we're going to be more in our power. We're going to make better decisions. We're going to be more tactical, more strategic. And we're not going to do it necessarily from emotion, although passion is great to have, but we're going to do it from a standpoint of calmness and clarity in terms of what steps we're going to take next.
Yeah, I like that because back in the day, I used to have that tendency when I hit that wall, instead of trying to look for other ways around it, I tried to keep going through it. And
that's right. Hey, I've been there, my friend. I've been there, and sometimes we did break through. But my sense is that the older we get, this has been my experience anyway, the older I get, when a strategy is not working, the more intense it gets, the more I try to lean into that ineffective strategy, right? It's like the universe says, oh, Chris, don't do that. And then it says, Chris, don't do that. Then it says, Chris, don't do that, right? And so it's like, oh, okay, I got to learn. I got to try something a little different.
I like it. What's the difference between being motivated and truly committed?
Yeah. Well, I love this little example, and I can't say that I made it up, but I heard it one time. I was at a conference, and it was a guy that was speaking. He was a real estate guy, and he said, you need to be. There's a difference between being interested and being committed, right? And many of us work through life and we're interested. I want to have this achievement. I want to get my black belt. I want to have this business. I want to have this. I'm very interested in that. But committed means that you're going to take the actions and you're going to create the plan and you're going to follow the disciplines. And you're going to get the assistance to make that happen. And this guy at this conference said, I had bacon and eggs for breakfast this morning. The chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. Right. And I also like to create the distinction between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is great. I use it in my 6 M's, right? Maybe I use that word because it started with an M, but motivation is great. But many times motivation only comes when we've got someone there to motivate us, right? It's a reaction where we all feel pumped up and I'm going to go do this. And, or someone's watching us and we're motivated to show them that we can do something. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that can really serve us. I mean, I definitely have had that experience as a martial artist. I played football all the way through college. There were times I was motivated because a coach was screaming at me. You know what I mean? Yeah. You probably the same thing in wrestling. We got motivated. But I like to create the distinction between motivation and inspiration. Motivation and inspiration. And the guy that Jack Canfield, who did Chicken Soup for the Soul, I heard this story years ago. He was on a ABC News, I believe, being interviewed with Deepak Chopra. They were both on a split screen. And he had just come up with the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, right? Which are very inspiring, very motivating. And the interviewer asked Deepak Chopra, he says, does Jack Canfield motivate you? And Chopra says, no. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting thrown under the bus by Deepak Chopra. And he says, no, he does not motivate me. He inspires me because motivation is short term. Inspiration lights a fire inside of me that lasts a lifetime.
Yeah, so I like that.
You're inspired. Now, like one of the concepts I talk about in my work is your big why. Like if you have a breakthrough that you want to experience in your life, you may have the plan, you may have the tools, all the strategies, etc. But what's your why? Why is that important to you? Because if you have a strong enough why, the hows will come in front of you, right? Yeah. If you're doing it because if you want to release 50 pounds because you want to make sure that you're alive when your daughter walks down the aisle one day, that's a big why, right? If there is, and we all have those things, but many times we don't take the time to really ask ourselves those questions. And I've loved Simon Sinek is one of my favorite authors, and he talks about the idea of starting with why. And he does a little story about in August of 1963, 250,000 people didn't convene in front of the Lincoln Memorial to hear Martin Luther King deliver his I Have a Plan speech. It was the I Have a Dream speech. The dream was his why, and that's what inspired everyone. Had he have said, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 and given a plan, some people would have clapped and said, that's great. And some people would have said, that was a stupid plan. But when he talked about a dream, it allowed people to get in touch with their own dream and their own why. And that's what made it so powerful. So that's one thing that I do a lot in my work with my clients is helping them understand what is their big why. Because once that's in place, now the rest of everything starts to fall into place.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing too. Like you have to always ask the why. Because the why's got to be stronger than anything that's going to make you quit.
Absolutely. And particularly when challenge comes, because if you don't have your big why understood and it's part of you, that first challenge comes, it's much easier to quit But when you have the why there, it's like, okay, no, this is why I'm doing it. This is the reason behind it. If I could indulge in a little story, I left the corporate world to open up my martial arts school back in 1995. And when I speak to particularly entrepreneurial groups, one of the things I say is, hey, tell me if this is true, guys. When you started your new business, it was not only the most exciting time of your life, it was also the most petrifying time of your life, right? And they'll all raise their hand, yes. So I was still working for the top consumer products company in the country, and I had a great job. But it's not what my heart was asking me to do. So I went and I signed a lease on a building to open up a martial arts school. And my wife at the time, I came by on a Friday afternoon after work, and she was playing the role of general contractor. They were doing the build out on the building, right? So she's got the hard hat on and the clipboard, and the guys they've got the saws and they're framing out the doors. And I got in there, Ryan, and I had a total panic attack. It like hit me like, this is real now, right? And I looked around and I looked at her and I said, oh my gosh, I am so sorry I put us through this. This was the stupidest idea that I've ever had in my life. I'm going to go to the attorney on Monday. I'm going to get us out of this lease. This was stupid. And she's looking at me like I have three heads. And then she says to me in a phrase that I won't repeat for your general audience, but basically we'll talk about it when we get home. So I'm ready when she gets home, man. I'm going to I got all my reasons why we're going to get out of this stupid thing. And we sit down after dinner and she says, okay, I helped you get into this to follow your dream. And if you really want to get out, I will also help you. I just have one request. And I said, well, that's fair. What's your request? She said, my one request is that you sit our two sons down right now and explain to them why you are not going for your dream. She sunk my battleship, man. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? It was the last thing I would ever want to do, because my boys, as they were growing up, you can do anything you put your mind to. And here I'm, and that became one of my big whys, is I wanted to not only do this work because I felt I could make a difference, but I knew I could make a difference in my kids' work and in their lives. And that became one of my big whys.
Nice. I like it. What inspired you to start coaching and speaking on stages?
Yeah, it's interesting. The speaking kind of came natural for me because I've been involved in martial arts since age 10. I was an assistant instructor at age 13. I had my own martial art program in my little town in southeastern Wisconsin at age 16. So being in front of a room and delivering and leading and teaching was always second nature to me. And then when I went in the corporate world, I was speaking to 500 member sales staffs as part of my training program. So there was always something came natural, and always something I really enjoyed doing. And then when I opened up my martial arts studio in 1995, I had 6 competitors in a 2-mile radius of me, martial arts schools. And I thought to myself, I need to be able to differentiate myself between these other businesses, right? I mean, there's only so many yellow page ads you can run and so many, newspaper. And we didn't have the internet back then when I opened up, so that wasn't an option. So I started going to schools, elementary schools in particular, and then middle and high schools as well. And I started speaking, and I didn't talk necessarily just about martial arts. I talked about the power of nonviolent conflict resolution and kindness, etc. And pretty soon it just started taking off. And I always tell people, if you can keep 100 first graders occupied for 30 minutes, you can speak to anybody, right? And so then after a while, it just kind of grew from that. And people started asking me to speak at events, etc. And then when I had my school for quite some time, I just had a feeling that there was a next level that I needed to do. And I hired a coach and a life coach, and we were working on my next evolution and next thing I want to do in my life. And I was a little bit confused. What does this next thing look like in my life? And he came to my martial arts school and he observed me for an evening. And at the end of the evening, I'll never forget, we sat in my office and he goes, "You're a coach. You're coaching all the time. I'm watching with all your students, and you're not just telling them to kick and punch, but you're incorporating the life messages to them." And anyway, I was like, bing, it just hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's what I do. And so Now it's a matter, I basically use my martial arts as my foundation, and it's also my unique selling proposition, if you will, right? But I'm just taking the same lessons I was teaching in the martial arts school, and I bringing them out into the world. And so what I always say is you don't need to be kicking and punching for 20 years to get, glean the positiveness of these messages. You can apply these in your life right now, whether you ever train in martial arts or not. I'm a little
Yeah.
biased. I think it's a great avenue to learn those lessons, but you don't need that. You can get them in different ways.
Yeah, I think so much stuff in like the combat sports or any sports translates so much into the corporate world.
Right. That's right. It really does. And two, if students find a quality school, it's developing their character too, as we talked before, right? It's
Yeah.
not just about the kicking and the punching and the fighting. And that's all great stuff. And, I've been doing it for years. But, I always wanted to make sure that I was making an impact in a student where they were coming out of our program 3-4 years after they got, it took them to get their black belt, that they were different human beings, right?
Yeah.
They showed up in life differently because of that experience.
Yeah. I like that. What types of services do you provide then?
Well, I have my keynote speaking business, and I call it Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching. And so I do empowering leadership keynotes on what I call the mind of a champion. And then one of my signature programs is called the Breaking Through Board Breaking Experience. So what we do is we take a board that you would learn to break in martial arts, and the same boards that my black belts break, people in companies and corporations and associations that I do it, they break the same boards. And what I do is I take them through a process where they identify a breakthrough that they want to have in their life, business, personal relationships, and they write it on one side of the board. And then we go through a process to help them understand what are the limiting beliefs or beliefs that have been holding them back. And they write that on the other side of the board. Okay. And then I take them through on how to actually do that board break. And they stand in front of the room. They proclaim what their breakthrough is and their limiting belief. And then the holder of the board has it with the limiting belief staring them right in the face. And then they break the board as a metaphor for breaking through that limiting belief. And I've had people have amazing experiences from that, that impacted them on a very deep level. So that's what I do from a speaking standpoint. And then, of course, I do my one-on-one and group coaching. I'm coming out now with what I call the VIP intensive day. So I can do this either virtually or in person, where I literally spend an entire day with someone, taking them through these breakthrough principles to find one thing that they want to have a breakthrough in their life, and take them from A to Z and put them on a path so that they can use it as a launching point to have that breakthrough that they deserve.
Awesome. I love that about guys breaking the boards. I mean, that has to just be like a release of everything, and helping your subconscious manifest.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, I've had so many experiences, and I'm humbled by this, where people have had like just real, excuse the pun, but breakthrough experiences. But if I may share a story with you, I did this. I have an organization here in Denver that has me come each year. And so I was doing it. It's about 50, 60 people in the room. And sometimes the greatest lessons come with the person who doesn't break the board right away. And it takes them a while, right? Because people, get behind them and they get to see someone move through an adversity. So there was this one gal, and she just wasn't breaking the board, just hitting, wasn't breaking. And now these 50 or 60 people, everyone in the room had broken their board except for her. Her name was Debbie. So now it's just, now I take over the board, and I look at Debbie and I'm like, okay, I coach her a little bit, and she hits it once, thunk, she bounces off of it. She tries a second time, she bounces off. Now it's like been a dozen times she's tried to break this board, right? And I lean over to her and I whisper in her ear and I say, Debbie, I'm going to be here at this conference all weekend. And if we don't break it on this next one, we'll just try tomorrow. Okay. Well, as soon as I said that, you could see that she totally got zeroed in, and she takes her breath and crack, she breaks the board. And the entire room stands up in a standing ovation. She jumps into my arm with tears flowing down her cheeks, right? Well, when she and I spoke afterwards, I found out that she had multiple sclerosis. I didn't know this. So she had the power to break it, but she couldn't control where her arm or where her hand was hitting the board. And she then shared that with the group. And I could just see people's hearts softening, their minds opening. It was such a great example of someone showing tremendous perseverance. And it was the best blessing that room had. Everyone broken the board on the first try, everyone would have said, "Oh, that was a lot of fun."
Yeah,
The fact that she didn't, that gave everyone a gift.
that's awesome. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can simply go to my website, which is www.chrisnatzke.com. That's CHRIS, N as in Navy, ATT as in Tiger, Z as in Zebra, K as in Kangaroo, E as in Elmer.com. www.chrisnatzke.com. And you can see my speaking programs. There's plenty of videotapes in there. There's my coaching programs, and that VIP intensive is listed right on the top right now too, if they're interested in having a discussion to see if that can help them.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes too for everyone.
Excellent.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
You know, you had asked me, I think at the very beginning, you said, is there anything that I want to leave them with? And one of the sayings that we have in the martial arts is a champion doesn't need to be told what to do. They just need to be reminded. And sometimes that reminder comes from changing our mindset, which we've talked a lot about here already this afternoon. But sometimes that reminder is reminding ourselves that there's a power inside of us that we maybe even haven't gotten in touch with, but if we have faith that it's actually there, it can be the thing that can change our lives. So what I would say to anyone listening out there is, if you're struggling, if you're in doubting, whatever, listen to me when I say this to you. You've got something inside of you that's meant to be expressed, and make sure you're not one of those people that are lying on your deathbed. You know, when people are on their deathbed, what hospice workers will say is people don't regret the things they did. They regret the things they didn't do. So what is that one thing that you want to lean into, that you want to express in your life? Because if it's in there as a dream, if it's in your heart, it's meant to be expressed, and you can do it.
So true. All right. Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Yeah. We have another saying in martial arts, and I use it in every keynote talk that I give. It's that a black belt is a white belt that never quit. I have over 2,000 students who have gotten their black belt with me. And I can think of only two, Ryan, that the first time they came into my school, they had all the attributes to be a black belt: focus, concentration, flexibility, speed, tenacity. One of them got their 4th degree black belt with me. One got their 2nd degree black belt with me. But what about those other 1,998? Well, they just kept showing up. And the fact of the matter is that some of my best black belts, and then by extension, some of the best instructors I developed, were the ones that struggled the most when they started with me. So a black belt is a white belt that never quit.
Great advice. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your story with all of us and your knowledge.
I appreciate it, my friend. It's been my pleasure.
Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.